Joining me today, we have Dipu Patel. She's Vice Chair for Innovation and Professor at the University of Pittsburgh DPAS program, and Christina Barss, Chief Transformation Officer from Problem Solutions. We are so excited to have them. We're looking forward to this session. So without further ado, I will let the ladies take over.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for inviting us. Christina and I are honored to be here and really excited to be talking about this, a topic that we're both very passionate about. Thank you for putting in the chat where you're joining us from. So please go ahead and do that. I cannot wait to interact with you. We're going to get started. Next slide. Christina is kind enough to play host for my presentation for me today. And as any educator does like to start, we're going to start with our learning objectives today. We're going to discuss the transformative impact of AI on traditional healthcare and our education, specifically healthcare and clinical education, and how it's impacting what we do, how we do it, and where we can do it. We're also going to analyze how generative AI or Gen AI, including large language models, are being used to personalize educational content. And finally, we'll let you walk away with some strategies and best practices for integrating these AI tools into your curriculum and into your educational practices. So let's get started. Next slide. There are a few things that we have seen, or very few things, I should say, that we have seen that has made an impact on our landscape, whether it comes to education, technology, or healthcare, in terms of large language models. And I'm going to specifically talk about ChatGPT. When we refer to large language models, that we'll use those terms interchangeably, although know that there are a number of large language models out there, many for general use, many for very specific uses, but we'll use the term ChatGPT and large language models a little bit interchangeably during this presentation. But this graphic kind of goes to show you the impact and the uptick that we had in use of ChatGPT compared to other platforms and other technologies that came to light. So that red line that goes straight up on the left-hand side of your column is the uptick of use from 0 to 100 million users over the number of days. And you can see it absolutely beats Netflix, which I think has become ubiquitous for all of us in our homes. But what we're seeing is that we have, obviously, this slide is a little bit old now because we have way exceeded the 100 million users that it initially started with within a month, within its first month of launch. So whether you're using it or not using it, this is here to stay. And we're here to show you how to incorporate it into your daily lives. Next slide, Christina. So we'll start with some data, right? We always want to make informed data-driven decisions in the curricula that we're teaching. And as we're evolving our curricula, it's important that we make data-driven decisions. So there was a study done by McKinsey & Company where they looked at 8 learning technologies that were enabling change. And this was, the study was done during the pandemic. What better time to do a study on how technology is adopted than during a pandemic? And I would say this probably one of the few silver linings of being in a pandemic is that we really saw an uptick in the use and leveraging of these technologies. It's not that they were new, but people were using them more and more to their fullest capability as the pandemic kind of rolled out for us over the last 3 to 4 years. And so what we saw was data being shared within group works, increase in connectivity and community building. We saw student progress being tracked using all of these data milestones. But we also saw from our consumer or our student side that they were demanding these connectivity tools, and they wanted these tools to enhance their classroom experiences, to build communities for themselves. And to give you a flavor of what we're looking at, this was a study that was done with, I believe it was 600 faculty across all institutions, including minority-driven minority institutions, and about 800 students. So it's a pretty robust study. On the next slide, you'll see that as we dive a little bit deeper into the actual use of the technology, we saw, as I mentioned, a really large uptick in the use of technology to build connectivity and community. Again, it's not that these technologies weren't there or the platforms weren't there. It was that we now really leveraged it both on the faculty side as well as the student side. And we also leveraged it to do group work and increase classroom interactions. And we also started looking at how machine learning and powered teaching assistants were going to make a difference in our teaching strategies and from a student perspective in their learning strategies. And you can see that although there was an uptick in all of them, augmented reality augmented or virtual reality suites products didn't have the greatest number of uptick. Although I would say that with Apple coming out with its VR headset, I do think that eventually we're going to see adoption of this technology in many domains of our teaching in the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years. I would say right now, I think it's a little bit cost heavy for our student population and our institutions, but I do see this as the technology becomes more accessible and affordable, we're going to see a shift in the use of AR and VR technologies. So what we're here to say is the future is now. That future that we thought that leveraging hybrid classrooms, leveraging VR, leveraging AI, all of that was in the future. Well, we're here to say Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever star you're on, it's already here. And we're going to have to learn how to adapt and grow with it. So let's talk about AI. Next slide. We historically have thought of AI as something in the future that we didn't really know how to use or even how to think of it. And this pyramid provided by Dr. Anthony Chang, who is one of our esteemed colleagues in the AI space, who is well known, really breaks down the data, information, knowledge, wisdom pyramid. And this basically kind of goes to speak to how we can really have a common language and understanding what AI is and how it informs what we do in terms of education. So it's a popular model that really shows us a relationship between these 4 entities. And the model suggests basically that the data is the raw material that's collected and processed to generate information. And information is then transformed into knowledge by adding context and meaning to it. And then finally, wisdom is the highest level of understanding that can be achieved by synthesizing knowledge with experience. And you'll see I've kind of skipped over intelligence, but that's kind of where we are. And if I were to ask the group, and we can certainly talk about this at the end of our presentation, is artificial intelligence intelligent? Right? And that's a big conversation to have. Are we in the knowledge area of artificial intelligence, or are we really creeping to the wisdom area of artificial intelligence? And the answer is, I don't know. The answer is maybe a little bit more. I would say I think AI has its good days and bad days, just like humans do. So really, that is the thing that we're going to be grappling with over the course of the next decade as AI becomes more and more ubiquitous in our daily lives. So really, we have to find that fine balance. And Christina, if you could go to the next slide. Fine balance of really understanding data and stopping at wisdom before we go into the territory of conspiracy theory. Right? And we all know there's plenty of conspiracy theories out there. But really, one of the things that I share this graphic with my students is, data and information and knowledge is where you kind of start, but insights and wisdom are going to come with experience. And it is our job to understand when we're rearing into conspiracy theory and back ourselves off from that. It becomes harder and harder to say, but you really do have this graphic really just puts things into context for us when we're talking about a new piece of technology or tool, which AI very much is, right? It's a tool, not anything else. It's no better. I mean, it is better than the internet, but it's still a tool that we use to augment the work that we do. So on the next slide, we'll talk about where AI is really making an impact in the healthcare setting. We've talked about education. It's important that we educate the pipeline, because these students who are going to go out and get jobs are going to be working in an AI-ready environment. So it's important that they know what they're walking into and how they're going to be able to adapt their practice styles for success in their own roles. So again, this is not an exhaustive list, but you can see here areas in the front office and in the back office end where AI has already been implemented in real cases and real scenarios. And this is just a handful of tools or documentation tools that are there to that our students are going to be grappling with as budding healthcare providers. And I will say jokingly that I need students to be ready, because when I'm a cranky old lady, I really need them to know how to use these tools, right? And so you can see that it runs the gamut. The tools run the gamut, everything from patient engagement to care and clinical decision-making, prior authorizations, which really frees up a lot of time for clinicians, and revenue cycle management, which helps the back office a lot in terms of really making some business operations and clinical operations decisions. So how do we go about doing this? We'll advance one more, see now, and it's about really thinking about education and rethinking it beyond the walls, right? Rethinking not only education, that you don't have to be physically on campus, in a building, in a classroom, to learn what you need to learn. But then taking it outside and beyond that, you as a patient don't have to be in the four walls of a clinic to receive the care that you receive either. And so both of these things are coming together in parallel for us. And we need to be ready to educate this generation. As patients, we're demanding that the students be ready, right? Our providers really want, our consumers want the providers to be ready for telehealth. How many of you have used telehealth in your daily lives, whether for yourself or for a family member? And it really doesn't impact the quality of care. Study after study has shown that telehealth is safe and provides high quality care given the right pieces of technology, the right platforms, and the right kinds of tools. Obviously, it's not for everything, but for a lot of things, such as chronic disease management, it can be the appropriate platform to deliver high quality, safe patient care. So here we have a couple of things. I'll throw some statistics out at you. In one report, it was noted that by 2027, the digital health industry will be valued at more than $550 billion, which comes out to about an annual growth rate of about 16.5%. And some sectors are slated to grow faster than that. And the shift will have to happen in the way we work, in the way we educate, and in the way we learn. And all of those areas are going to be touched by this piece of technology. So it's really important that we learn how to learn as educators, as clinicians, as consumers of care, right? We have to really wrap ourselves around what this technology can do for us so that it benefits all of us at all stages of life, whether we're starting our journey as a practicing clinician or we're the consumer of care or the deliverer of care. So on the next slide, I have here some examples of practical applications of large language models. And again, as I said, you can use ChatGPT, but there are other large language models out there, and how to incorporate them in the various phases of student learning of a generalized healthcare student, right? So in the didactic phase, we can use them for virtual patient simulations. We can really integrate it to have realistic patient interactions and teach students to make clinical decisions in a safe, controlled environment. In the preclinical setting, we can reinforce a lot of the knowledge and the concepts that we're teaching them over the course of a year or two that they're with us, right? Really reinforcing medical knowledge and concepts, having the large language models do interactive quizzes and on-demand explanations, and perhaps even remediation, right? If there's a concept that I'm explaining to a student that is just not getting through, maybe I'm not using the right analogy, right? For example, if I use a sports analogy, because I'm not a sports person at all, I will totally screw it up. But you know what? an LLM could do that. It could really give them a sports analogy that they may be able to understand. And then post-graduation, once a student graduates, we still have CME requirements that we have to meet. And this is really going to help us get personalized learning modules to stay current and on pace with the way the technology is changing and shifting how we're delivering the knowledge, so that we can stay on top of whatever the new piece of technology is or whatever the new protocol is for various treatment plans. I can tell you that when I went to school, biologics were not a thing. Immunologic or immunotherapy was not a thing. All of these things have happened since I've graduated. Now, granted, I graduated more than 20 years ago, but still, I still have to know those things, because those are, at many moments in certain patients' lives, are standard of care. And it's important that I know them so that I can educate my students about them as well. So really staying on pace and on top of medical knowledge so that we are able to impart it with some level of facility to our students. So on the next slide, Christina, thank you. So here's where we can really see the bridging of that gap, that common ground that we've been looking for as educators. ChatGPT or large language models can really help personalize learning, make education accessible, and provide real-time feedback. And I have the 4s are asterisks because I don't know what else it can do. There are so many other things, and I'd love to hear what ideas you have, if you could put them in the chat, about what else you've used it for to really help elevate your teaching and learning styles. On the flip side, healthcare education, it can improve learning outcomes, reduce learning costs, and really help us innovate in terms of our teaching styles and pedagogy. Because one of the things that's really helpful for me is when I'm sitting with a student who, let's say, didn't do well on an exam, I only have one way or a couple of ways of explaining a concept if they're not getting it. And I also only have an hour or two of my time. Whereas a large language model, such as ChatGPT, there are no constraints on that except for whatever the student needs to really grasp that concept. So it really does kind of help us help them kind of a situation. And it's a win-win for, I think, both areas. So I'm going to close with I have 2 more slides. So the next slide is about really learning how to think outside the box in terms of how we use these tools and technology. And to think not just in the now when the student is a student with you or in your course or in your curriculum, but think downstream of what impact you can have for the patient at the end. Because at the end of all of this journey, there's a patient attached to it, right? And how you can seamlessly integrate and weave this thread throughout your curriculum, each course or each lecture, so that the outcome at the end is student success and further down the line, patient success and improved patient outcomes. Easier said than done. Everyone's like, Dipu, what are you talking about, right? It's true. We are at the beginning of this journey because I know we've been using it, Christina and I have been using it for a while. It's only 18 months old with technology, and the amount of impact it has had. We like to think that it can do all these things, but really it does have its limitations. So on my final slide here, some of the challenges that we have to overcome are around, I'll start with the patient on the bottom right here, a poor digital literacy, because at the end of the day, the patient is at the crux and the core of everything we do in healthcare education. And there are no US or context-specific adaptations, right? I will say digital literacy is something that kind of spans the entire globe. It's not specific to the US market. And health system, lack of national standards, lack of regulatory standards, and unclear reimbursement pathways, all of these things are leading to health systems not yet adopting these systems. Although I do think this year will be marking a shift in that arena. And I think a lot of it will be driven by patients demanding it, to be honest. So the consumers are going to be demanding it. And then healthcare workforce, lack of perceived effectiveness, lack of digital literacy on our part. And that's one of the things that Christina and I are very passionate about, is really educating the workforce, educating the educators. Because you're right to have a little mistrust, but it's not okay to be fearful of it, because fear only perpetuates more fear. And I think learning this technology is more important, and leveraging it for ourselves and for our patients is definitely better. And then the final piece is the technology piece of it, the lack of interoperability, poor UX and poor user design, limited infrastructure. I think those go hand in hand with the health system. It's what they have at their base in terms of infrastructure. I will say the health systems are going to need to invest in the infrastructure if they're going to make this shift, this technological shift into AI, because a lot of the current platforms that we have are either not, don't have the ability to really take on the infrastructure that AI demands, or it's just too old and they really need to kind of start all over again. And that is part of digital transformation, and really rethinking your strategy, not for the next year, but for the next 5 years, for the next decade. What are you going to do from a technological standpoint as these shifts in the workforce and technology continue to occur? So with that being said, I'm going to hand it off to Christina, who is going to share with us how to kind of implement some of these ideas.
Well, thank you. I think we have a question in the chat, though. So
Yeah,
what is in the chat first?
Yes, so we had one question. What are your thoughts on how AI could improve accessibility issues for patients with disabilities and help them access their own healthcare interactions?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question, because a lot of the ethical frameworks that are coming out from the WHO, NIST, all of them have accessibility and affordability as part of the ethical framework that they're putting forward. I will say that right now, because it's very text-based and text-generated, we have some work to do. Although as vision machine learning becomes more and more the norm, which I think it will in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see changes and shifts in accessibility from a healthcare perspective, but also from an education perspective for our students. I hope that answered your question.
If not, they can put a follow-up in the panel. Okay, a couple of questions. Can you share the study referenced about the size of digital health by 2027? That's something, if you want to give me the link, I can put that in the follow-up.
I will look for the link when Christina's talking and share it with you.
Perfect. And then I am taking the ABAIM course and certification.
Yeah.
Hope you two know what that is.
I know what that is. I am certified.
Is this something that's beneficial for an educator?
I did find it beneficial, but I will say that I assume you're taking the introductory course. I would say that you should probably take an intro to the intro before you take that class.
Okay.
And whoever asked that, I'm happy to talk to you offline about it as well.
Perfect. And I think those are all the questions. We had some comments about the different ways of using chat, generating responses to practice conversations between clinicians and patients, generating content that matches the knowledge level of students to properly evaluate their understanding, and some suggestions like that. But those are all the questions right now. So I'll let Christina go over.
That goes to the heart of digital literacy. I completely agree. Go ahead, Christina.
Thank you. All great questions. And that really brings us to the next step, which is how might we? So as we're talking about the future is now, and there's also even a brighter future moving forward. And so how might we upskill our people and build their digital skills to leverage AI, select use cases and proof of concept, pilot to scale, improve processes and tools to leverage AI, and prepare our culture and our people to leverage it. And that's a little bit more of how I'm going to unpack the rest of this presentation. As we're saying, there's a lot of us that are early adopters that have taken AI, embraced it, and seen how we can use it. also by seeing the benefits, how do we bring others along with us? So transformation in this stage is really understanding how we're improving the experience for students as well as the efficiency of our education and our efficacy. Now we need to know where we are before we know where we're going. And on the screen is the strategic AI maturity model. And the nice thing about this model is it helps us to understand where we are strategically in our organization to chart our course. So just to level set with the group, where do you see your organization currently on this continuum, going from very episodic, reactive, doing little bits and pieces of AI in pockets, all the way to operational, embedded, and then innovation? Just answer in the chat. I'll get a good idea of where everybody thinks they are. And just as a little aside, most people are still at the reactive and barely emerging. The organization I work for, Problem Solutions, we're an augmented enterprise, meaning that we have a traditional hierarchy for an organization, as well as agents and AI that augment each and every one of us, and our actual synthetic FTEs, full-time employees, that help us as we work through. And we started that last June, July, and we're continuing to use voice interaction to collect our data and have a collective intelligence for our organization to run analysis every week to see where our organization's going. And with all of that, we're still at the operational stage.
We're getting a lot of comments in the chat. I'd say about probably half saying reactive, some saying reactive / emerging. I don't think we've had anyone say higher than emerging so far.
Well, then we're in good company. That's awesome. Thank you. So how do we get people to where we need to go? And this is a conceptual framework for upskilling your organization and bringing people along. It's a holistic approach, looking at the tech skills, the ethical considerations, and change management. I'm just going to go really rather quickly through, but for data, thinking about your data security, your data management, the principles of data quality and government. The idea is that you're only as good as your data. So garbage in, garbage out. When we go in and do a AI readiness assessment for organizations, the first thing we ask is, where's your data? What is your quality of data? How stable is your data? Next is the analytics. How can we interpret and derive results from the AI? So I like to think about how this is all computers in the group, humans in the loop, right? So we're using the computer, we're using the software of artificial intelligence to help augment and move us forward. That brings me to AI literacy, and that's for the need for your workforce to understand the basics of AI, just as Dipu was talking about earlier, how AI systems are built, function, and also the impact of AI on their roles in the industry. This is a huge ripple going through all industries right now. Now, workforce trends is keeping abreast of how AI is going to change the way we work and also the roles that we have. And then ethics and equity is understanding bias, fairness, transparency, and accountability. You've probably seen or heard about AI colonialism. You've probably heard and seen about people's concern about bias or systemic racism being perpetuated through AI. So again, when we're thinking about AI and how we're building and implement them into your organization, it's as good as how the prompts are being designed, how the data is being presented, and making sure that we're mindful that we're getting a good, solid demographic as we build those models moving forward, and we do not perpetuate systemic racism or bias in our work. And lastly, change management. How are we navigating through this change by AI, and what the analytics will help us with our organizational process, culture, and operations? Now, Dipu talked a little bit about this. I'm going to build on a little bit more on augmented intelligence teams. Now, our organization, as I said, is an augmented enterprise. But let's go back to like 2008, 2009, when interprofessionalism was huge and they started having interprofessional competencies and changing the way that we were growing and guiding and educating our pre-med and our nurses. How are we bringing everyone together? That changed how we learn and also how we come to work and show up at work. Augmented intelligence teams are going to do the same thing. Around the table will not only be different personalities, different professions, but also different levels of AI augmentation. So thinking about how that will affect your interdisciplinary collaboration, enhance your decision-making, continuous learning systems as we continue to learn and grow, how this helps with patient-centered care, because all of this is about the patient, how it helps with operational efficiency, the safety and healthcare, ethical oversight, and then education and training. Now, I said, computers in the group, humans in the loop. How do we think about what types of employee resistance we have? Many of the people that are here today are already like, yay, let's move forward, but how do we bring others along? And so there's 3 types of employee resistance that we've witnessed. One is the technological resistance, and Dipu talked a little bit about this earlier in her challenges, which is the fear of incompetence, the lack of necessary skills in order to navigate with AI, and that anxiety that AI, the reliability of like what comes back. We all have had that or heard about AI, some of the limitations of hallucinations, drift, and amnesia that AI or large language models may encounter when not programmed correctly. Culture and psychological resistance or psychosocial resistance, change aversion, I'm for change, you go first, right? Making sure that employees prefer, when you understand how they prefer familiar routines, how do we take that and bridge from old knowledge to new knowledge? How do we get them so they feel comfortable? And then also understanding that lack of control that people may have to give up in order to, again, work in an augmented enterprise. And then organizational resistance, fear of job loss, and lack of involvement in the implementation of the process. So how do we foster that employee acceptance and that adoption of AI? Well, it's through transparent communication, education and training, highlighting success and engagement in the process, bringing them along, letting them participate, use a sandbox. We do a lot of AI boot camps. There's a lot of I love the fact that Dipu said you might want to take a pre-education before you do the pre-education, because there's so much to learn, but there's a lot of information that's out there readily available. Now, we've talked about our peers and we've talked about our students and how to bring them along, but really it gets down to when we start to look at changes of this magnitude is how are we dealing with our leaders and the 3 types of leadership resistance that may be occurring. So we'll talk about psychosocial, organizational, and technological, and we'll start from that vulnerability of tech, from that loss of control that we talked earlier about the psychosocial, and then about the job readiness or the retention of top talent if you are not keeping up with AI and people will leave to go to an organization that is. So let's unpack first psychosocial. So psychosocial vision misalignment, that when AI is brought into your organization, does it align to the mission, vision, and values of your organization? Patient safety, quality, service, and innovation. Is it aligned? Resource allocation, thinking some people are worried about losing their jobs. Even at the front line, people are worried about losing their jobs. How can we help them to understand how this will help you be more present at the bedside? How will that help you that you'll make sure that your patients feel comfortable in sharing information, in feeling that they are safe and that they still are a human and part of the patient experience? Now, organizational, and talking about that, it's the decision-making process. We're talking about reliability, repeatability. How are we going to do that? It's really through us taking really good experiments and planning. So, for example, a colleague and I were talking earlier last week at a conference explaining how you do a lean hypothesis and then what type of experiments would you do to push that hypothesis about integration of AI into your organization? And then what qualitative and quantitative standards are you going to use to be able to validate that that hypothesis is actually valid? So going in and using this in your organization, especially in an industry of healthcare where numbers are king, research is king, and being able to say, we know that this is going to be something that we can rely on because of these studies, because of this validity. And lastly, that technological resistance on for technology, that they may question, and rightfully so, that do we have that existing infrastructure, as Dipu talked about? Do people have that tech skill? And do we have the right staff to support it? So we can bring and spend all that money and it can become a virtual monument. So how, when we're trying to make the right decisions on bringing in technology, are we doing technology that will help us? For example, one of the projects I just worked on, we mapped out an entire process from the beginning of the process to the end, doing a value stream map from Lean Six Sigma. So doing a value stream map, and then we identified where the AI interventions would happen, and then calculated out how it would shorten your lead time. So thinking about it in healthcare, how would these AI interventions help shorten the time for either length of stay, for, because the sooner you have the patient out of the hospital, the quicker they can recover, the more capacity you have to help more patients. Having that as part of your ROI with your leadership will really truly help you in doing integration of AI, and also bringing your students along so they can understand that AI is not replacing a clinician. It is not replacing leadership. It is enhancing, and that mostly the tedious pieces that are being taken care of allow us again to be fully present with our patients so that we can truly be that human to human and patient-centered care. So a question that I have is for the chat is addressing leadership resistance. How would you address these issues that we just talked about? Love to hear that.
Everyone is shy now.
Oh,
You
I was
asked-
shy. Oh, they were so. You have that psychologically safe environment. I'm scaring people.
All right, okay, so we're getting a couple. Frederico says a bottom-up approach. Edie says show some small wins, like using AI to find themes in large survey data.
Excellent.
Identify champions in your organization. KOL support. I am not sure what that abbreviation is. Let's see, Robin says she's currently using AI scattered into training to show the benefit.
So KOL is key opinion leader support.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then offering, for example, also data security and compliance with healthcare regulations, assuaging those types of worry. I think you're all illustrating your return on investment on long-term benefits and educate the potential. So you're all aligned, beautiful, in what are the ways to help us address leadership resistance. So 5 steps to the future is increasing your technological understanding. 2, align your learning strategy and business strategy. That's one of the things that's really important in education, is understand so that you by doing that, there's a way to align your metrics to your educational interventions, to your organization's strategy, and making sure that they're aligned. That helps you with letting go of legacy educational pieces, because what will happen in some of this transition is people are going to want to stay with more traditional because they feel comfortable, and they're going to continue because what worked, but what worked in the past is not going to work for now or in the future. Considering the talent and the students that we have, they are digital natives. They're going to think their neural pathways are different, how they process information, how they gather information. So we have to meet them where they are. So helping that align your learning strategy to your business strategy is key. Thinking about also motivate and shifting those mindsets to help people understand. And exactly, this group is fantastic because you had the right ideas on how do we help them understand and bring them along. And having a champion, somebody with a very strong voice that can help bring legitimacy to the work that you're doing and validity to the efforts is fantastic. Also, the small wins. Pilot and grow. Again, thinking about where are your small proofs of concept, like I said, about regarding that lean hypothesis. What is it you're going to do? For what audience? To impact how? And then what are your experiments to help support that? And then quantitative and qualitatively, how are you validating your success? And then once you've gotten there, is thinking about your scale and your sustainment. How are you going to hardwire those wins into your organization and make it scalable? Some of the small wins are great. Also thinking as you're designing those small wins, how would you be able to take that and extrapolate it and just tell the story of how you could save here, how could we save across the system? So key elements for facing the future is really, as I leave you and we open up for our questions, is inspire, perspire, and aspire. So inspiration is why AI. What is inspiring us to do it? Why are you, as we said earlier, how might we? Why are we using AI? Is it for the sake of using AI, or is it really a deeper and well thought out way to help improve our processes? What are your hopeful outcomes for using AI? And what are the metrics? How are you measuring the success of AI? Especially in education, we're looking for not only the level 1 or level 2, we're looking more for level 3 and level 4 of return on our investment for education. Perspiration is the considerations. What are the things? How are we going to risk mitigate? What are our challenges? How are we going to check and do on our data and our tech stack? Knowing the unknowns, usually a little humble inquiry there on how do we find out what we don't know, or that we don't know? Does that make sense? What we don't know that we don't know? And then next steps and planning. And then aspiration that's the part where we've built on our thoughts. We've built on making our plan and our proposal. And then the aspiration is really where we're going next. What are our use cases? What are our proof of concepts? How ready is our data? I think I've said it several times. Data is king. And then capabilities. What is your system's capabilities to be able to support that infrastructure? Just as there's business, if people are familiar with design thinking, there's business canvases. Our business ecosystem canvas, there's learning ecosystem canvases, there's also AI readiness canvases to help you understand on one page, where is your organization strategically to be able to plan moving forward? What is your strategy and governance within your organization? And then what investments are being willing to be made, be it time, be it resources, be it money, to be able to move forward with AI. So with that, we can open it up to questions that people may have for us. And we'd like to thank ELB Learning for hosting this seminar. We really did enjoy working together to bring this together. And just as Dipu had said, you can contact either one of us as a thought partner because we really are passionate about this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Christina. I do want to emphasize, I think both Christina and I, having been doing this for a while now, it's a journey. There isn't a day that doesn't go by that there's a new tool that I learn about and I was like, oh, I didn't know that this existed, or I don't know how to use this one. And I think the other thing to remember is that there is no one size fits all. Each of these tools have their pros and cons. You use them for a particular thing. It may not work for something else. So we're not quite at the place where we can say, here's this perfect tool for you and for your organization or for your course. It's going to take a few of them, just like you don't have one app that does it all on your phone. Similarly, you're not going to have one tool that does it all, at least not yet. Maybe in the future.
All right, thank you both so much. We do have some questions coming in the chat. There was one earlier back about data privacy. Where does patient data privacy come in with AI? How secure is AI? Can we touch on that briefly? I know that's kind of almost another webinar in and of
The whole
itself.
webinar.
I was going to say, oh my God, talk about a can of worms, right? Yeah, secure it is. I'm going to tell you, don't put anything that you don't want out there into the ether, just like you wouldn't on the internet. Privacy is not really a thing that has been fully vetted in the realm of these open models. Definitely OpenAI, ChatGPT, Bard, all of these large language models that are out there are open source. And so definitely don't put anything there that you don't want other people to know. I would also, in our context here, don't put any patient information, do not put any student information. It is a FERPA and HIPAA violation to do so. That being said, if your organization has decided to build its own large language model that is internal to its ecosystem, that is perfectly okay to do. And there are, to my knowledge, only a handful of organizations that are doing that currently. Christina, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, and so those are a great question regarding AI, because people think of AI as just like the large language model like ChatGPT or Bard or Gemini Ultra. The idea, though, is that a lot of organizations are now moving more. And as we're talking, I mean, I got texted that there's now it becomes easier and easier to have your own private instance in your organization of a large language, your own personal ChatGPT, garden walled within your what do you call it, firewall for your organization. But the idea, though, is that when you are designing those proof of concepts, that's part of what you would look at for your proof of concept, and what systems would it be integrating in within that. And yes, if they want another webinar on just data privacy and stuff,
Yeah,
all sorts of stuff.
happy to do it. Yeah, it is a lecture and perhaps an entire series in and of itself, because there's a lot of ways to look at it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see. Have you found that your students are eager to learn about AI? Are they asking questions about this? What is sort of the perspective there?
So full disclosure, I think students are eager. They're hiding it from their faculty.
Amen. Yes. Yes. So I've sat in a couple of meetings with faculty when
Yeah.
ChatGPT started up, and people were like, how do we stop people from using it? How do we test for it, just as we test for plagiarism, et cetera? And just like we were telling people not to use calculators, I'm aging myself, but you're seeing, using calculators, eventually it was okay, right? Or being able to use a laptop during a training session or in class. Now it's everywhere. So the idea is that I think students, I agree, because also we see this with employees as well. They're using it because of the tremendous gains that they get. The idea is that how do we help them and meet them where they are to guide them in the appropriate and responsible use of it.
Yes, and I'm going to say I want to reemphasize the couple of concepts that Christina mentioned, which is computer in the group, human in the loop. Human in the loop is probably the most crucial aspect of any piece of technology, whether it's this in terms of AI or ChatGPT or internet or whatever. You put in anything in the internet, you're the one responsible for it as a human being. It doesn't work if you don't, as a human, participate and engage with the piece of technology. And so it's the same sort of application. If you fear it, you're not going to get people using it or teaching them how to use it responsibly. And for organizations that basically say you can't use it for your work or you can't use it, they're just going to do it behind your back. I mean, it's like telling people not to push the red button, right? Like they're going to push the red button. That's just how it is. So
Right.
I would rather say, use it. Tell me the flaws you found in it. Why didn't it work? Why wasn't it the best? How much work did you have to do to fix what it spit out for you? Because
Exactly.
it's not as good as people think it really is in their heads. Right now, I think we're in the honeymoon phase of it. But it's not without its flaws. I can definitely attest to that as someone who uses it on a daily basis.
And you've seen like incredible, like there's one group I've been working with that we gave them tasks. We created prompts that we use in ChatGPT-4 to be able to help take care. It's actually a talent acquisition, and we're able to reduce something that would usually take about 48 hours into less than 2. Now, when we did that, part of the coaching was read it, validate it. Don't just cut and paste it in. Make sure that it's, because again, there's things like drift, there's things like creativity, that's also called hallucination, but there are those types of things. So no one's going to lose their job to AI, but you will lose your job to somebody who knows how to use AI in a wise manner.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, thank you. Let's see, couple last questions. Do you have any recommendations for informational sites that you could follow for development, recommendations on how to write prompts to get the information wanted? What are your resources for kind of learning how to use AI effectively?
Christina, you want to go first?
That's great. And you know what we'll do is we'll give a couple of links. I follow 2 newsletters that help, and it's just basically a digest that you're able to click, and it gives you all the information that's happening currently. So it helps me keep up. I mean, I'm the only person in my with my group that is not a developer. Everybody else are developers that I work with. So they're sometimes talking and I need to keep up, and I have FOMO, fear of missing out on what they're talking about. So having that that newsletter really helps. And as for prompting, there's a couple of really great YouTube videos that are out there to help with prompts, but also OpenAI just released a guide on how to write prompts. And I would highly recommend OpenAI's guide because it's very thorough and well thought out. And remember, to write a prompt for OpenAI is the same to write it for Bard. It's the same to write it for Bing AI. It's the same to write it for Gemini Ultra. The concept of natural language processing or natural language, that is the beauty and the big part that happened in November 2022 is that it democratized developing. And that everyone, you don't have to learn Python, you don't have to learn other types of code in order to be powerful and to leverage machine learning.
Yeah. I think the couple that I have, I would agree with OpenAI's little starting prompting. Google actually has a really nice course for the basics of AI. It walks you through, GANs and all sorts of like the basic understanding of machine learning and what it means. So, and it's free and you can kind of take a course. Also look on LinkedIn Learning. If you have access to that through your institution, there's a number of them that are on LinkedIn Learning that I have found really, really helpful. You can also follow me. I post pretty regularly on all things digital health and AI. I think those are also, and there are a ton of newsletters out there that you can follow. I think through just kind of going down this rabbit hole of like, I'm interested, just like any learning algorithm, Google will pick up on what you're looking at. It'll start feeding you what you need. So there's lots of access, but you can certainly direct message me. I'm happy to share a long list, but I know Christina and I will have a list for you afterwards to share as well.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, let's see if we have any last. We do have a comment that lots of libraries provide access to LinkedIn Learning.
Yes.
That's a great way to get access to that. If you have any last questions, everyone, give everyone a moment to type. So usually when I say that, I get one more question frantically at the end. But
Stephanie, I'm just scrolling through, I'm looking at a couple here. How can AI contribute to HIV cure in the nearest future as a global health issue, followed by AI impact on global health education? To be honest, I think this is the piece of technology that I think truly has the opportunity to democratize access to care, access to education, access to literacy. Whether it actually will happen really is in the hands of the policymakers. But I do think that much like the internet changed how we practice and what we do, I do think that this is really going to be the next inflection point in this millennium. And so I think it will. And in terms of HIV cure in the nearest future, one of the things that I didn't mention here, what AI really has been able to do, and in fact, the COVID vaccine was in part developed because of the rapid sequencing of the RNA through AI and the development of the vaccine itself. And so drug discovery, so research to market, that scalability and that pipeline is definitely being shortened by AI. And that's happening across the board. So I would imagine that chronic diseases are going to be impacted by this from not only the ones that we think of, but like including things like HIV. And then I speak of digital health, although we're talking about AI here, but digital health, I mean, we literally did we not just find a cure for sickle cell using CRISPR? We just launched that last month. And we're seeing a lot of changes in these diseases that impact us on a global level. So more to come, more to come.
All right, well, I think that's the perfect end to this presentation. Thank you so much, Christina and Dipu, for taking the time to share all of this information and your knowledge with us. This was fantastic.